Touchdown, Navy! Touchdown, Army! Touchdown, Air Force! How about this?
Hello and welcome to our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. Brent Stover with three-time SEC Coach of the Year, Houston Nutt. Lombardi Award winner back in his days at Notre Dame. It's Aaron Taylor. Randy Cross is College Football Famer. Guys, we're going to be breaking down Army, Navy, and Air Force. But before we get into it, talk about what makes this brand of football so special.
For me, it's the purity of the game. Like, I remember when I was in high school and I was playing, you'd run out the tunnel, it was Friday night lights. Nobody was going on to play college. You were just out there because you were with your buddies, you were having fun, and you played because you got the opportunity to play. When I watch the academies play, it's guys out there that are playing together, they're playing tight, they're playing with heart, and they're playing for all the right reasons. And I am dang happy that it's those guys that are out there protecting us, because the same thing that they use to put it all on the line on the field is what they do when they're serving our country afterwards.
And when you talk to the guys about the game and you talk to their coaches, they always come back to one word, and it's perfect. We can beat anybody in the country if we're perfect. We can beat if we're perfect. And that's the emphasis. It's the emphasis on what they do in school. It's the emphasis on what they're going to do, you know, when they become in the service themselves. It's such a crazy pressure level that they live to, and you ask them about it, and they kind of look at you funny, like, well, that's the way it is. That's why I came here, because I came here to be perfect.
That was my very first experience, Army and Navy. I was there with Randy, first game ever witnessed. The attitude, the heart of these young men, you know they have high responsibilities. They do a lot of other things for us. But I'm going to tell you, that reward to go play that game, what they put into that game for 60 minutes was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that was last year in Philadelphia. All of us were there. This year it'll be in Baltimore. All right, let's get right through it. We'll start with Army. 2013 was a tough year for the Black Knights. They took their first game of the season, double-digit victory over Morgan State, but would then lose 8 of the remaining 10 games for a 3-9 finish that spelled the end for head coach Rich Ellerson. He led Army to a bowl win as recently as 2010, but totaled 7 wins in the last 3 years. So what was it, Aaron, in your mind, that did Ellerson in?
Well, you can't start the way that he did and finish the way that you did. The trajectory was going wrong for that program, and it was time for him to make a change. It's interesting because when you look at Coach Ellerson, he should have been successful. He had success at where he was at Cal Poly prior to. He brings that system there, and it just didn't work. It's so hard to be able to coach at the academies that I think they got it right by bringing in Jeff Monken. He's been underneath Paul Johnson in Navy. He was there at Georgia Southern. He was there at Georgia Tech. He's done the things that he needs to be able to do, and I think you're starting to see some of the changes happen in that program, and I'd be very interested to watch that transpire out onto the field.
I think what you've also seen is you've seen the Army, the higher-ups, the people in charge, come to the decision that, yeah, we want to be competitive. When Rich Ellerson was the head coach, and he's an Army guy, he's a West Point guy all the way with brothers and uncles and family, but those kids were asked to be cadets first and athletes in their spare time. Now I think they're going to more of the model like Navy. Yeah, they're cadets, but they're going to be recruited to be top-type athletes in his program. And he'll run that same offense that took Georgia Southern. They beat Florida with that offense. And he'll get the kids. They're going to be bigger. They're going to have a little more girth. They're going to have a little more speed. I think that's really going to be the key to making them more competitive among the academies.
And I talked to Monk earlier this week, and what he told me is that for the first time in the academies, to your point, Randy, he had every single member of the football team, fellas, back on campus by June 15th. They were out of the field. They took care of their cadet responsibilities first. They made it football from June 15th out. They've gained 1,400 pounds as a team in this offseason.
Yeah.
This will be the biggest Army team we've seen in quite some time. And I think, to your point, that's going to make a huge difference on Saturdays.
That'll help in a big way. Because what we witnessed last fall, they didn't have that type of weight, I guarantee. But I tell you, I think you're right. I think it takes a coach that's been through it. Coach Monk was under Paul Johnson, understands it, just like Coach Ellerson. I think it takes a different type of coach to truly understand the academy, to know what it takes. The recruiting's different. the regiment, the time frame. A lot of things are much, much different than the average college program.
Yep.
All right, so Ellerson is out, and former Georgia Southern coach Jeff Monken, as we mentioned, is in. Here's what he's up against in his first year at West Point. I'm sure they'd love to pull that upset over Stanford. And looking at the schedule, which game have you circled? Aaron, I'll start with you. What's the number one there? Obviously, there's Navy, and there's Air Force as well. Anything else that stand out?
Well, I think the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, without question, is their Super Bowl. It's their national championship. It's the only thing that matters. But I think a game that's going to prove to be important is that Stanford game that you mentioned. Raymond Maples, they lost last year in the Stanford game. You have to be able to stay healthy. The one thing that's always hurt all the academies is health. And when you're going up against a team like Stanford with big bodies on both sides of the line of scrimmage, you hope to be competitive, get your guys a taste and a great experience, but more importantly, keep your guys healthy so that you can line up and play again.
Yeah, this is going to be the kind of challenge. You look at the schedule, the schedule should tell you, wow, what are their other kind of guys? Well, this year the other kind of guys are Buffalo and Rice and teams like that are not bad football teams. I think Army is going to struggle until this new attitude, new system really takes hold.
I do too, and I think it's so important that Coach put his blueprint, his philosophy. I'd worry about that first game. I'd worry about everything geared that first game. I don't think you can be looking down the road, especially the Navy, rolling down the road. Better take one day at a time and try to get better, because if you look at last year, well, there's a lot of improvement to be made.
All right, so now let's get into the team breakdowns a little bit. We're going to go through the teams and assign grades to each unit. Keep in mind we're grading on a scale here, comparing these teams to one another rather than the FBS as a whole. And we'll start with the skill positions: quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. I think the key question for Army is, who's it going to be lining up under center?
There's no question. That's been the question in the offseason, and both of their quarterbacks that played last year were banged up a little bit. You have A.J. Shore and Angel Santiago. And Angel Santiago is somebody that got banged up a little bit last year, and he's somebody that can run the option pretty dang well, does a good job of tucking it and being able to make plays with his feet, which is what you have to be able to do at that position. He is somebody that needs to be able to get things done. He needs to get himself healthy and stay healthy. He's not the biggest of players, so he's one of those guys that you got to be concerned with. But whoever it is that ends up starting, I think that they're going to feel pretty good about also having some depth at that position, because both these guys are going to be able to have a chance to be able to get in there.
Well, going into the season, it would have been A.J. Shore at quarterback, but he hasn't been able to really play yet. He's still recovering and trying to get better. I mean, they've got a true freshman, Cato Brown. You talked about Santiago. Cato Brown's been taking a lot of the first-team reps, which is probably fantastic for Coach Monken, because he can get a kid like that, a young guy, those kind of reps, may go eventually back to the older player, but the young guy is getting all those good looks.
Whoever the quarterback is, you need these two tailbacks to be healthy. Terry Baggett, Raymond Maples. Raymond Maples got hurt. You got to keep these guys healthy. Terry Baggett was a guy that went over 1,000 yards, guys. Very physical, very tough. Of course, you know options are going to be one of the primary sources. That's the offense. You know, these guys, again, the only reason I give them probably a little lower grade is I got to see them last year, and I just think there's going to have to be some improvement from a lot of positions. But I'd probably give these guys a C.
A C. Okay, so Houston with the Army skill positions. Randy, you jumped in a moment ago, but we need a grade from you.
I'll give them a B. I give them a B as a group.
Okay.
And the reason I gave an A- is I'm a little bit more optimistic, I think, on Army because of Baggett, because of Raymond Maples, because of Giovanelli. They have some guys on there that are deep at that position. Quarterback, there's a little bit of a question mark, but I think as a whole, across the board, I think as a skill set on offense, they're going to be all right.
You'll have a good job of getting a shot. Maybe a government-type job when this TV career is over.
That's what I make. I'm a lemonade man.
All right, our skill position grades are in. Now let's see who will be manning the trenches and giving them room to run. You can see the projected starting lineup here. Guys, what do you make of this unit? And let's start with our former O-lineman, Aaron Taylor.
Well, I see a couple of 6'7" bookends at the tackle position. Steve Shoemaker, he's only 282, but he's kind of the beefy, staunchy guy in there that kind of brings some attitude. Those weights are less than what they're going to be when they open the season starting in August. These guys have gained a ton of weight. They've got 3 offensive linemen that are over 300 pounds. There's Shoemaker, Hugenberg, all those guys are much bigger up front, and I think they're going to see an immediate benefit because of that on the offensive side of the ball.
I tell you what.
We need his grade in, quick. Aaron?
I believe I gave them a B. I know based off what it was last year, that's probably a little bit more optimistic than some of the other two guys. But I think that added weight's going to make a difference, and they're going to look a little bit more like Navy's offensive line.
I'll tell you what's amazing is I didn't realize they were that big. They've already gained some weight, as you said. That's impressive. Got a couple of guys 6'7". Awesome. Just get in front of somebody and get some ties for those backs. I'm going to give them a C.
A C. Okay.
Yeah, I give them a C, too. I think they've got a little ways to go with this new system, new way of doing things. They're not going to be outmanned, which is going to be gigantic for them.
Yeah, huge. All right, we need to take a break. We've talked to Army's offense. After the break, we're moving to the other side of the football. Can the Black Knights improve a defense that surrendered 31 points a game last season? We will tell you when we come back.
They were coming.
Welcome back to our Inside College Football Armed Forces preview. We just went through Army's offense. And I bet Coach Monken wishes he had this guy in the squad. Pete Dawkins, 1958 Heisman Trophy winner and member of the College Football Hall of Fame. One of the all-time greats. But let's move on to the other side of the ball, starting with the pass defense. And this was a problem for the Black Knights last year, finishing with the 9th worst pass efficiency allowed in the FBS. So how will they fare this year? Who do you see stepping up? Start with you, Aaron.
Well, they returned 3 of their 4 defensive backs, so I think that that's going to help. But a kid I like, and I'm a homer, I'm going to go with De La Salle, former cornerback Josh Jenkins at that position. I think he's a cornerback that, as a true sophomore, 6'0", 175 pounds. He's somebody that they like that has the maturity and the athleticism back there to be able to help them now. Last year, they didn't do a very bad job of defending the pass. The problem was they gave up so many yards rushing the football that not a lot of people decided to throw the ball against them. So, with that said, I think that they can improve upon that. You add to the mix a guy like Jeffrey Bacon, who's kind of a hybrid safety linebacker type player that comes around the box, can make some plays. I think they're going to be fine back there.
And what about a grade for you? What do you think?
I think I'm going to go grade-wise. I'm going to go B+. Again, I'm a little bit more aggressive than maybe some of my compadres. But my glass is a little bit half full.
Where were you when I was in school?
The guys at West Point are loving
I'm trying to grade on the curve that I wished I was graded upon.
You're going to get a Purple Heart just for this show. Coach, how about you?
I do like that you say 3 out of the 4 back. But the bad news is they got to improve. They've given up too many. And I'm talking about runs, coming up and making tackles. When the backs are in the secondary, you got to make plays. You got to make tackles. So they got to improve. So I'm going to give them a C.
Okay. How about you, Randy?
As a group, I give them a C. I think Jeffrey Bacon as a safety who was basically playing a linebacker type position before. Now he's a safety. He's had his nose near the line of scrimmage for the last 3 years. Don't anticipate that being terribly different. Kind of the old strong safety in the box type of feel. But the big difference that'll have to happen this year for this defense is those corners have been on Fantasy Island for the last 4 years. I mean, it's basically you're one-on-one. You got that side of the field. You got that side of the field. These other 9 guys are going to worry about what's going on inside. And that's just shredded some of the young corners that have tried to play there.
All right, the rush defense struggled as well, as Aaron alluded to, allowing over 200 yards a game. Can Army improve both the pass and rush defense? Is this the key to committing? Is the key to stop one or the other, or can they go after both here?
Well, here's the deal. And, Coach, you know this, and Randy, you know this always. We go down, you sit in these meetings when you call a game, you say, all right, Coach, what is it that's going to be key for you guys to be successful to win this ball game? We got to run the football, and we got to be able to stop the run. That's something Army's got to be able to do. They got to be able to stop the run first. People are going to try and take advantage of their undersize. They're going from a 4-3 last year to a 3-4, which means they're going to be, by default, having more athleticism on the field. So they're going to have to be able to bulk up a little bit in that position and do a much better job stepping the run than they did last year.
Can I get a grade from you on this, Aaron?
I'm going to go C, because they got gashed last year, and I think that's going to be an improvement based on what it was last year. If you talk to Coach, he was more of an F guy. No. I'm saying they're going to be a C. There are going to be some improvements there, but because of the change of the scheme that they're running, I think that's going to take a little bit of time.
Well, there's nothing like hope. There's nothing like a brand new system, new coach coming in, a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. But again, it comes right back to blocking and tackling, and especially tackling. So I'm going to give them a D right now with the hope of improvement coming.
D plus, in fact.
D plus.
Randy.
You talk about getting gashed, and we talked about the size on the offensive side of the ball. The front three that are listed as starters, their weight from last year, 235, 257, and 249. That's not very big when you start playing Stanford. You're giving up, in some cases, 70 pounds at the line of scrimmage. That can be rough. They are going to be bigger up front, so I anticipate that being a little bit better. I'm going to give them a B, because I like, not only because they're a 3-4, their linebackers are going to be so disciplined, scraping and running into the ball, led by Andrew King, who I think is a pretty good little inside linebacker.
Wait, those 249-pounders, those weren't the linebackers?
Those weren't the linebackers.
Oh.
That has something to do with that getting gashed.
Yeah.
They did match up with Stanford for that first half a little bit, even though far undersized, but it got a little bit ugly after that. What about the coaching staff? As we mentioned, Rich Ellerson is out, Jim Monken is in. Monken had a lot of success at Georgia Southern, but is it going to carry over to West Point? Big question.
They certainly think it is, and I think it is as well. I mean, this is a team last year. His team, Georgia Southern, beat the Florida Gators in the SEC. You see them there shaking hands. I'll tell you this, Will Muschamp wasn't that happy after that ball game because they got their tails whooped. He's somebody that knows how to work around the personnel and work to the strengths of what it is they've got. They had to get back to basics. They had to get back to who they were, reestablish their identity. He said, guys, that he thought that the program was a little bit loose. The guys talked about being perfect, Randy, that they were far from it, that they had kind of slacked a little bit in some complacency, and maybe that they kind of threw the towel in. Maybe they knew that Coach Ellison was going. I don't know. But he talked about having to come in there. The grade I'm going to give him is incomplete because I think it's too early to jump the gun on what it is he's going to be able to do. I think he's certainly primed for success, but I want to see what happens this first year.
I tell you what, again, coach coming in that understands offense, understands option, understands Army football. He's been under Paul Johnson, so there's hope. And anytime you go to the swamp and you win, you've done a heck of a coaching job. So there's going to be some real belief. I believe these players will really believe in the coach. I'm going to give them a C, again, with improvement coming.
Yeah, C kind of on the come. You know, the fact that they can get better and better, and this team will get better and better. I think the number one thing he has to emphasize and sell to these kids is that perfect thing, the attitude of how they take the field and how Navy does it. And I know because I'm talking about Army, the Army people are going, get that Navy word out of your mouth. But Navy's got it figured out. But I think Jeff Monken and company and his staff can sell. If we execute this triple option the way it should be, we get in people's legs, we get everything in the proper line, we get that fullback leading that thing off with that 6-inch step Houston's talking about all the time. If you do everything perfect, you can beat just about anybody. So like I said, I'm going with a C.
Lou Holtz taught you that.
Absolutely.
Step, right?
Over and over.
And then he over and over.
How did he teach you, Coach? We'll talk about that on another show.
I think we got to run to break. I wish. All right, when we come back, we're going to take to the C. Navy is coming off a banner year. Can the midshipmen take home a third straight Commander-in-Chief's trophy? More of our Armed Forces preview coming up next.
Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview on CBS Sports Network is being brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. 4 million members, 4 million stories. Navy Federal Credit Union.
Welcome back to our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. We gave you our take on the Army Black Knights. Now we move on to their longtime rivals from Annapolis. 2013 was yet another winning season for Ken Niumatalolo's midshipmen. And here's a look back at some of the highlights.
Huge run play. It's Damon Brown up the sidelines, and he's in. Reynolds barrels his way in, and Navy's going to win it.
The midshipmen trail by 6. There's room. Touchdown, Navy for the win. Sloan puts it through. Redemption for number 6.
Here he goes to the end zone, and it is caught. San Jose State on their last second of the game has a touchdown.
Keenan Reynolds, what do you got? Reynolds getting outside the numbers, and it's going to be a lucky 7 for the Mids.
Keenan Reynolds does it all, and the Mans have won it in triple overtime.
And we welcome you to Army-Navy America's game.
Copeland fullback again, huh?
He romps in, Navy touchdown. Watch out. Reynolds touchdown, a new single-season record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback.
So another year and another bowl appearance for Navy, their 10th in the last 11 seasons. And moving on to the skill positions, take a look at the Navy Federal Credit Union player spotlight, and it's the man leading the way for Navy, Keenan Reynolds. The junior ran in 31 touchdowns last season, setting the FBS record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. It's not going to be easy to top, but is there another historic season in store for Reynolds or for this group as a whole, Aaron?
I think when you look at the totality of this Navy offense, without question, there could be another historic season in that young man's future. And when you talk about great Navy quarterbacks, Keenan Reynolds is among the best that ever played there. And statistically, I think by the time this year is over, you may be able to say that Keenan Reynolds is the best Navy midshipman that's ever donned that uniform. You want to talk about a guy, what he gives up in size, he more than makes up with the size of his heart. He is a tough little sucker that has a nose for the end zone, and the team follows him. He is the Pied Piper. They will go where Keenan Reynolds takes them, and they love him. Because of that, and the fullbacks and the offensive line, I give that offense, and particularly the skill players, an A+.
Wow, high praise for the Navy skill position. How about you?
I'm going to follow you with an A, starting with that quarterback you've been talking about. Outstanding. But I want to talk about Jeffrey Whiteside. Because they overpopulate the line of scrimmage so much, this back has been so valuable. Get him the ball. Had over 500 yards last year. And also, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So he's a dual threat. Actually, they have a dynamic duo in Brandon Sanders and Jeffrey Whiteside. Both these guys are fun to watch. They fit this offense to a T. I'm going to tell you something. They're just tremendous supporting cast for Keenan because they work together so well with the timing. You see him catching the ball out of the backfield right here because everybody's so worried about the option, they're able to get the ball down the field.
You look at the engine, though, this triple option is usually the fullback. I mean, it's a given you've got to have a dynamic quarterback. But that fullback, Noah Copeland and Chris Swain kind of share that. That's the guts. That's the inside of that pit. You saw all those plays where suddenly Reynolds is cutting up inside and there's nowhere to go. That's usually because the linebackers have all sucked up on that fullback and they're honoring that inside run because that's the sort of the poison you have to decide. You've got to stop the inside running game or they'll just give it and give it and give it. I mean, I've seen games where that fullback position accounts for over 200 yards rushing because the defense won't stop the initial dive.
All right, now let's talk offense.
I give it an A, by the way.
No, that's important to get that in. So obviously high praise from all of you guys. Let's get now into the offensive linemen, and we've touched on how good their backfield is. Obviously, a quarterback position. The big fellas in front of Keenan Reynolds had an awful lot to do with his success. Randy and Aaron will back me up on that, and it can only help that Navy brings back 7 linemen with starting experience. Can this unit get the job done for Reynolds and company once again? There's
no question. I think they're a big reason why Navy has done so well and really elevated their game above the other academies. You talk about Jake Zuzek, the guard, 6'0", going to be about 300 pounds this year. He started every game for the last 2 years. He is dependable. He is tough. He gets up to the second level well, and he's an athletic lineman. That's what you need, particularly, Randy. You mentioned the fullback. Look at him getting his chip blocks, getting up to the second level, opening those holes. Good drive, drives his man to the ground right there, paving the way for a Keenan Reynolds touchdown again. When you have offensive linemen that you can count on, can reset the line of scrimmage, especially when they're giving up weight to those other guys, that's what you need. And Zuzek embodies that, and he does it perfectly.
No question about it. That offensive line works so well together. I want to go with the center, Tanner Fleming. There's nothing like, as a former quarterback, having the ball where you know it's going to be there every single time, just like breathing. And I'll tell you what, the timing of this group, the step, the pad level, has been outstanding, and they got a lot of confidence, and they're all coming back together.
I'll tell you 2 names you're not going to hear much of at all. If you live in Indianapolis, you won't hear their names very often. The names are Colton and Ingram. It's the name of the 2 offensive line coaches for that football team, and they are as good as anybody in the country. They're A type of coaches. This is an A type of an offensive line and an A type of a running game. They do, I think, an exemplary job in teaching these young men.
That entire staff now for several years has been pretty well intact and had a ton of success. So some strong marks for Navy's offense. And coming up next, we'll see who's forming Navy's blockade. We dive into the midshipman defense when we return on our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview, presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. We're back here on our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview. Going back to look at another Armed Forces legend, Navy's Roger Staubach, the 1963 Heisman Trophy winner, would go on to a Hall of Fame career with the Dallas Cowboys. Quite a legacy for Navy quarterbacks, present and future, to live up to. And now we move on to Navy's defense, which had a lot to do with their bend but don't break style in 2013. Will they carry that over into the 2014 campaign?
Well, I just want to protest a little bit because I didn't like them highlights against Notre Dame that we were seeing by our man right there. You know what I'm saying? Come on now. Hey, here's the deal. Here's the deal with Navy. They were so at being able to stop the pass last year. Again, defensively, it's going to be hard to be able to do the things that you want to do, but they got a guy by the name of Paris Gaines who's a free safety. He started the first part of the year as a cornerback, then he moved to safety. He's a versatile playmaker, got a nose for the football. He's somebody that they need to be able to step up, and he's proven to them time and time again that he can do that. He's a versatile playmaker. He plays around the line of scrimmage. As you can see here, he's got a nose for the football, can get those interceptions that you need, but if you need somebody to come up, stuff the run, he's somebody that can come up and do that. He's a big player for him.
Navy's defense, what's his grade?
Yeah, what are you going to go with?
I'm going to go with a B.
Looks like a B to me.
Paris, as a unit, I think it's
That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with a B. Lost 2 safeties, but he's recruited well. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an A for this defense, mainly because I've gotten to know and really enjoy the coaching of Buddy Green and what he can do, and what, more importantly, what his young men will do for him on that football field. I look at a player like Jordan Drake at inside linebacker. He's the biggest returning blitzer. He's got 3 sacks last year. He comes from the inside. He will just flat come after you. Doesn't always have to be edge pressure in this defense. They love to put the pressure in the quarterback's face.
And he was an outside linebacker last year, but for them to be able to do the things they're going to need to do, they're going to need Drake to step up. That's really the biggest question for that team's that inside linebacker spot, but he'll make that transition quite a bit easier.
Inside, up front, linebacker, as well as middle of the field in the secondary. That's certainly something that they need to clean up. What about the ground game? Can Navy take care of business with their rush defense? What do you think?
Well, they're going to need Bernard Serra, their nose tackle, and he's a 300-pounder, to be able to hold that point. In a 3-4 defense, you need somebody up there that can eat up 2 offensive linemen and not let guys get on those linebackers like Jordan Drake. So they're going to need a big year out of Serra, but I think from that standpoint, they have all the pieces in place, like Randy was saying, to be able to get something done there. I give them a C, though, because I want to see them do a better job against the run. They can't let guys get 5 yards of carry on them.
They lose a Cody Peterson. I'm really anxious to see who steps up at linebacker for them. They've always played so physical. I love the way they're coached. I'm going to give them a B.
Okay.
When you talk about who's going to step up, just by the nature of where these kids go to school, it's the model of who you want to have step up. You go, well, they got to be smart. They got to be great leaders individually. They got to be able to rally and motivate other players. And you're going, well, I guess this place probably has a whole lot of those type of guys just by their basic nature. But the key to that rush defense is going to be Bernard Serra. And he is a legitimate nose tackle. He plays the game on the other guy's side of the line of scrimmage.
That's a good spot to be. All right, moving on to coaching. Ken Niumatalolo has led the midshipmen to bowl games in 5 of his 6 seasons, including a win in the Armed Forces Bowl last year. What does Niumatalolo bring to this Navy team?
He brings an understanding of what it takes to be successful. He brings the best out of those players, and that's what it is you need to have. He understands the culture. I think he's done an amazing job, and because of that, I give him an A. He is the cream of the crop right now amongst the armed forces and the academies, and I think he's done a hell of a job.
So there's the A now for Aaron. What about you?
Absolutely an A. I mean, to the job he's done, to me, it starts with attitude. His attitude filters right down to his players. They do a super job of being physical, running the ball. Offensively, by the way, putting points on the board.
And in fact, it's an A+. So an A for Aaron, A+ for Houston.
Well, I'm going A2 on coaching. I mentioned Buddy Green, the defensive coordinator. Ivan Jasper, the offensive coordinator. Look for that name when it comes to some of these new jobs coming up at other academies or other schools that want to run that triple option. And Ken Niumatalolo, the most important word for that group, it starts with A. It's accountability. Are you accountable to your other players? Are you accountable to your coaches? Are you accountable to your academy? And that's the mantra those kids live by.
Pretty good grades. So Navy looks to be maintaining a pretty good GPA going into the season. When we come back, we'll tackle the Air Force Falcons. Will Troy Calhoun's squad be cleared for takeoff after a tough 2013 season? All that and more after the break here on our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview. Welcome back to our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. We just previewed the midshipmen, and now we move on to Air Force. And 2013 was not kind to the Falcons, who finished with a 2-10 record. So, guys, the difficult question. Aaron, you get first dibs. What went wrong with Air Force?
Pretty much everything. There wasn't a whole lot that went right for Air Force last year. I mean, look at what Calhoun did in his first 6 years there, going to straight bowl games. But without question, last year was the youngest team that he's had. It was one of the most injured teams he's had. They played 4 different quarterbacks. I'm not making excuses for him. It was bad. They know it was bad, but I would expect them to get better this year.
I'd say when you're young, you get injured. It just seems like the ball doesn't bounce that way very much now. The turnover margin, everything's out of whack. And I'm going to tell you, when you start losing, everything becomes a habit, and that's a bad habit. It's a tough year.
And they played a lot of teams out there in the Mountain West that could fling that thing around and score some points. And they ran into some problems early in the year. They had a couple of tough games, and it just snowballed from then. It was kind of the perfect meeting of inexperience and injury. And things just got worse and got worse. Though I see them this year as being a bowl team, maybe a 7-6 when this is all said and done.
That'd be a really nice turnaround. If they want to improve that record, they're going to have to get more out of their skill position players, particularly quarterbacks, where the injury bug hit hard last year. Nate Romine, then a true freshman, was dressed into duty after the first, second, and third stringers went down. He'll presumably be the starter out of the gate. Will the unit as a whole benefit from the experience gained last season?
Yeah, and I think Cale Pearson's somebody also that can be able to give them some role. When you have a single starter, and we talked about the injury bug, I think he's somebody that can get in there and help this team win. Everybody thinks that Air Force runs a triple option. They don't run the triple option. They have some triple option elements of their game. They run ISO, they run zone, they run power. They run a lot of physical football. So when you talk about what it is these guys can do, I think that they have the ability, like Randy said, to really turn this thing around. Their offensive line, they lose 4 starters. However, they are somebody that tend to reload at that position. Clay Hendricks does an amazing job as an offensive coordinator, and I think that young man we just saw there is going to help them win.
Whenever you have a year like you had last year, I'm going to tell you something. That offseason is always probably going to be one of the toughest off seasons there is, and that's where everybody has this self-check, the accountability, everybody doing their job a little bit better, much better. And then, as you mentioned, hey, they've thrown the ball, they do some different things. It's not true wishbone. They do different things, but they do got to run the football better.
Well, if you look at what they do, they can go with one back, they can go with the wishbone, they can go in the inverted bone, they can go with no back. But when they do get that back in there, and I'll give this skill group a B, I mean a C. You look at this group, Brom Hart, the fullback, that's going to be the key for this offense. Anytime you run an offense that is that multiple, you got to have a consistent something, and their consistent something is that fullback running the ball.
And what about the offensive line that paved the way for over 3,100 rushing yards for the Falcons, 12 from the FBS, but well behind Army and Navy, which posted 3,700 and 4,200 yards rushing, respectively. What do you make of the guys up front, Aaron?
Well, the veteran right there, and the only one that's returning is Michael Hussar, their center, 6 foot, 270 pounds. He might be a little bit bigger than that, but he is somebody that's tough, that's dependable. And again, Clay Hendricks, the offensive coordinator, runs that group. I called the staff earlier this year, and they said, hey, man, yeah, we lose a lot of experience there, but Clay just gets it done. We really kind of just say, hey, the offensive line's going to be okay. They never tend to worry about it, and that's a big reason why. That offensive line will need to play better. They'll have to mature quickly to be able to give those guys some room to run and some time to throw, but I think they'll get it done.
Good thing about having a young offensive line, they're a little older. They've seen a little bit more. They're a little smarter, and with that offseason spring, they've got to be better.
I give this group a B personally, and a lot of that's because of that one guy that is returning, Hussar, at center. He reminds me, you know, they've had defensive tackles and nose tackles there over the course of the last 10 years or so. It seems like the same guy has played there the whole time, but it's the same kind of body type. It's the kind of body type that Hussar has, that 6 foot, 275, that fire plug, but just intense as heck, just a beast.
Bulldog.
So O-line, B+, C, and B are our grades that we turned in. When we come back, we move on to the other side of the ball. And the Falcons scramble to improve last year's much maligned defense. That is a huge Question mark. Stay with us for that answer and more.
Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview on CBS Sports Network is being brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. 4 million members, 4 million stories. Navy Federal Credit Union.
We're back on our Inside College Football Armed Forces Preview presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. We just previewed the Air Force offense, but the real area of concern last year was a defense that allowed 40 points per game, 8th worst in the FBS, a far cry from the 16 points per game allowed by Troy Calhoun's squad in 2009. Let's start with the pass defense. Can the Falcons grab a few more interceptions than last year?
They better do something, because that was probably the worst defense they've had since Troy Calhoun got on campus, and that's saying something. The reason that they were so successful early on was because they were able to force those turnovers. They won the turnover margin by leaps and bounds prior to them being there, but they need to be able to shore things up in that position. I think that they'll be able to do that a little bit this year. I think we'll see an improvement. They had to back off of the physicality a little bit last year because of all those injuries, so I'm going to give them a C.
I definitely think they're going to be much improved. I really believe that. They had so many bad things happen to them. It's time for some good things to start happening. I do believe in Coach Calhoun. They'll be much better.
Yeah, I'm giving them a B, actually. I think Steve Russ, their defensive coordinator, very driven guy, like Troy Calhoun, an Air Force guy all the way. It won't be for lack of effort. This is a team that gave up over 250 yards rushing a game last year and 240 yards a game. They matched that with in passing yards given up. I think both those numbers shrink considerably. I give them a B.
All right, how about rush defense? Air Force allowed just over 3,000 yards on the ground, 5th worst in the FBS. And to make matters worse, they recently lost 4 linebackers from the team. Situation as we see sometimes with the service academies where they weren't doing what they needed to do. Can they bounce back in 2014?
I don't know. It's going to be tough. And that pending investigation is going to, I think, bear out and hopefully it works out well for them. But the personnel that they lost is certainly going to affect their depth, and that was something that hurt them last year because of the injuries, and that's something that affects all the academies. Troy Timmerman, their nose tackle, is going to have to be able to play well again at the point because of those linebackers. Keep bodies off of them and do those sort of things. They made some tinkering around where Dexter Walker's going to kind of be in a hybrid position. He's number 5. He's a guy that's got a nose for the football, kind of that tweener of a safety and linebacker type. I think there's going to be improvement there. And, again, I'm with you, Randy. I think this team's going to turn around again. I think they get back to a bowl this year. So I think there's going to be definitely improvement there, but I'm also going to give them a C. It'll be a great improvement from last year, but still with some work to do.
When you give up 51 touchdowns in about 8 conference games, to me, that's a mindset that they need to get off on the right foot. Get a little confidence going. Start believing in one another. When you start believing, that's when you start achieving. And so I feel like there's going to be improvement. Stay away from the injury bug. Hope the ball bounces the right way. There's a new belief on campus. But I'm going to tell you, it's hard because you hadn't seen it yet, so you're hoping.
So you said improvement, and I think before the show you were saying that they were getting an F, and I think now you gave them a
Hold on.
I mean, so
that's
some improvement already. They got better from prior to the show.
I'm trying to get last year out of my mind. I'm going this way now.
He's been working you on that.
I'm going forward. Thank you, Randy.
I give him a C. I think if you look at, Timmerman, Fitzgerald up front, that's going to have to be the base of this defense. You talked about the 4 linebackers that were, dismissed because of the school rules and whatnot. Last year, they started 8 different linebackers, just linebackers. Wow. 8. So now they're losing 4. It's going to be difficult when the heart of your defense, the linebacking in that defense is going to be lacking. But if anybody can do it, this group can do it.
All right, onto the coaching staff, and it wasn't that long ago that Troy Calhoun was in the running for some big-time jobs. We talked off the air about the Denver Broncos even. In 6-7 in 2012 before bottoming out at 2-10 last year. Calhoun and the coaching staff, can they get him back to 500? I think we already kind of know the answer because you got to be over 500 or right at 500 to make a bowl.
I mean, Troy Calhoun is a lifer, and I've been really impressed with what he's been able to do at the academy, what he teaches those boys, what he professes to those boys. I think what he has to work with and what he gets done, the fact that those guys go off and they do their training in the offseason, lose 30, 40 pounds before the season, the deck is so stacked against him. What he's able to do with what he's got is amazing. I give him an A, and I think they get back to a bowl this year.
I went on a trip with Troy Calhoun over to Baghdad to visit our troops, and I tell you, Troy is an outstanding person. You believe in this guy. You know he's a good football coach. I just feel like he's going to turn it. But as Randy mentioned, boy, there's got to be some pieces on the field. They've got to have players, especially up in the middle.
Yeah, I give Troy and his staff a B, because I think they've got not only the chops to be a bowl team, not only the chops and the experience to be a 9-10 win team. They can look at those young men and they can sell that to them, and they'll believe it because they know it's been done at Air Force, going back to the Fisher DeBerry days and everything forward. That is a winning program.
All right, so the grades are in. When we get back, we'll see how these teams stack up and who's the favorite for the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Will it be Navy again? Don't go anywhere. We wrap up this Inside College Football right after this. We're back one more time on our Inside College Football Armed Forces preview presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. We've gone through each Armed Forces squad, assigned grades based on our 2014 expectations. The aggregate results, some mixed reviews for Army and Air Force, while Navy put together an impressive GPA. So the midshipmen look to be the winners on paper, but that's why they play the game, Jerry Taylor. Before we get to your Commander-in-Chief's predictions, what are you going to be watching out for? Among these three teams, what's your number one storyline?
Well, the one thing I'm kind of looking for Air Force, I think they're going to turn around, is that pending investigation they have over the athletic departments, where they're looking into whether or not there were other players on other teams, and particularly football players, that were involved in grades, that were involved in doing drugs and different things. That's something that's uncharacteristic of the academies, and I'm sure that it's all going to bear out. But I think having that over your head can be a distraction sometime, and if there's any more personnel losses, that's definitely something that you got to keep an eye on if you're a Falcons fan.
I'm going to be watching for Navy going into a brand new conference, the American Conference. I tell you, anytime you step into another conference, you go to different stadiums, little different venues, to me there's always an adjustment. But the thing about Navy, if you look at the last 10 out of 11 seasons, boy, he has built this thing. He's done a really good job of winning, and there's the habit of winning. You saw the grades, O-line, D-line, quarterback. It's in place. Let's see what happens.
And you lay a lot of that foundation this year before you do go to that conference next year, and they've got more foundation to lay there. I'm thinking about a brother-in-arms for the Navy guys, Tom Ruby, who's a Navy SEAL, who's trying to walk on and make it as a linebacker at Northwestern. This guy, he took some of his leave to do spring practice with Northwestern, and now he's trying to make the football team as a walk-on. I mean, how does that not just jack? I mean, you just put him up front in front of the team every Friday night. That's it. Different story. Tell me about some of your experiences. Tell me about you think you got it tough? Let me tell you about something.
Yeah, let's redefine what adversity is. But I think here's the point, though. We've started the very show about these guys playing football. This is their escape. This is their reward. We should dread going to practice and how hard they would be in the 2 days. That's the easiest, most fun part of these guys' day is when they're playing football.
Quickly, who wins the Commander-in-Chief?
Navy's an A. Army's a C, and Air Force is a B.
It's Navy. How about you?
Navy.
Navy wins it. You?
Navy in Baltimore, and we'll all be there.
Going to be fun. We're there every year. CBS Sports Network. Randy Cross, Aaron Taylor, Houston Nutt. I'm Brent Stover. That does it here on our Inside College Football Armed Forces preview. We'll see you next time here on CBS Sports Network. Have a great night.